Just what connects us, yeah, we're both Estonian. But then I ask for Aet's advice, research advice sometimes for the Degrowth Society, where I'm also involved in Estonia. And then Aet drags me to research kind of meetings like that. So I'm very curious, very happy. But I understand you are researching from different universities, different countries, right? And working on this climate something. All right. So I know that you are interested in agonistic approaches and how the citizen assemblies or deliberative mini publics kind of approach that field. And Aet, you mentioned before also something about street demonstrations. So street demonstrations, like demonstrations on the streets. So yeah, I've been doing that a lot as well in my active life as an activist, urban activist and urbanist. I'm more of a democracy artist now, and I stole that title from Taiwanese democracy artists. Somebody had it on the laptop. I was like, oh, beautiful. Yeah, I'll call myself like that also. But I'm more and more focused on deliberative democracy. So I'll tell briefly about that because I'm not sure how much you know, but you can stop me if this is too banal for you.
I'm sure that these are kind of practical skills that you have, and you actually have been doing what we have been discussing more theoretically. So I'm sure that all of this is interesting. This angle is definitely interesting.
Yeah, and I think I won't talk for 30 minutes because you probably have questions, and this is better to leave for that. But I can't share the screen. Maybe you have to submit me the.
Apologies. Yes, I'm going to make you co-host now.
But just briefly also, what is the Center for Developing Democracy? My organization that I joined 3 months ago, actually, but that I've been collaborating for years. Not that center, because this is newly established 1-year-old kind of unit within a bigger organization that has been working for open society, so to say. So very inspired by Karl Popper's ideas, but also James Robinson's ideas. Why nations fail, inclusive nations, non-inclusive nations, all that. So we're working for open society on a very broad scale, and why I was late, sorry, because we just had a process with the Estonian Parliament. So we're trying to nudge the state of democracy research, basically, fundamental research on democracy, the democratic institutions, the separation of powers, the accountability, all that. Because the state is very, very bad, at least in Estonia, and actually also in the Nordic countries in general. So our focus is the kind of Baltic Sea region, countries around the Baltic Sea, and the Nordic countries as our role model, the strongest democracies. Okay, and within the center, I, together with a colleague of mine, who we've got infected with, not with corona, but with, my computer doing this noise. Oh, it is. We got infected by citizen assemblies because it's such a standardized format, and there are many different formats within that also. But let's not go into that. Citizen juries or citizen observatories. Different James Fishkin also does deliberative polling, but I'm not sure. I think this is more of an academic thingy, not for real political impact to accelerate climate steps or whatever the case is. Yeah, because there are many methods out there, but the citizen assemblies also is structured, standardized. It has fantastic international community around it, combining researchers, practitioners, think tank people, activists from different fields, and the practice also has been spread, has been multiplied now over the years, specifically around climate issues. So I show you some materials. Just what is a citizen assembly? This is a handbook on citizen assemblies. I can't remember who was the author, but I was looking for, infographics, and there are not that many on what is it actually, and how does it differ from, usual consultation for example, or usual policy making. It differs, I would say, maybe in 3 aspects. First, the participants are a randomly selected group of people that represent that population by education, age, their sex, their, I don't know, regional location, and there can be more components or features added there actually. So instead of engaging to, I don't know, let's discuss climate policy, whoever can come to the town hall 6 o'clock in the evening, instead of that, it is very, very carefully designed, and this random sampling takes a lot of time. And usually also these marginalized groups are taken into account also. So, and like, we're organizing here in Estonia the 3rd climate assembly now with Tallinn, and Tallinn is the population of 430,000 people. But the citizen assembly on climate, it will be on biodiversity and green spaces. It will compose only 60 people. So 60 people is enough for that kind of around 500,000 people to actually represent the whole population. That's just an example. On the national scale, this can be 100, between 100 150, and it doesn't matter what the population size is. That's the kind of general practice. So the random sample comes together, and then it's knowledge-based process. So the second kind of must are the very defined phases of an assembly. So the chosen people, the mini public, they have to go through learning about the topic usually from scientists, but from experts, and that this is also, there are ways to kind of make it very objective and balance it. So nobody in the climate assembly, no expert can come and say like, hey, but oil shale is our brown gold. We have to keep it. We have to keep, digging it. This is eliminated from the process. Then they hear, this is missing actually from this scheme that I just noticed. There's also, after the experts hearing, there's the stakeholders hearing. So all the stakeholders that are, that are around that topic, they have equal, they are being kind of, it's a very democratic process. They are equal in that sense. They have 10 minutes to present their views on that topic. Experts usually have a bit more, 12 minutes. It's not much, but it's, it has to be in a kind of pitching way. Of course, there are possibilities to ask questions to kind of digest the information as individual participants, but also usually the setup in an assembly is, groups around the tables, or maybe there are no tables, small groups of 6-7 people. And that also helps, creates this kind of safe space and more understanding, and group discussions are a very vital element in the assembly. And then there are facilitators within these tables. Some countries, this practice has spread around the world, and it exists from the 70s already. But with climate issues getting more and more problematic, the last, I think, 5 years, there's been a boom of climate assemblies. And some countries, they don't use table facilitators at all, because they trust that the participants and the process itself and the kind of rules and agreements that the participants co-create in the beginning, that this is enough already. We haven't tried that yet here, but I guess one day we will. Because our aim in Estonia, and not only Estonia, in this region, is also to institutionalize this way of making decisions together, basically delegating them to the citizens from the public sector side. Okay, and then I jump from one topic to other. Then the mini public, in the tables, in the groups, they slowly start to create recommendations on the topic that the citizen assembly is held on, and usually the topic is in the format of a question, and then there are like subtopics also. So what do we mean by biodiversity or the green spaces? Is it does it cover the whole city or just some parks? So it has to be very, very clear and in plain language also. That's a vital thing. And then they start proposing recommendations. And of course, that's also carefully designed process, but not in terms of the content, of course, not. And then there's also voting at the end. So it's not, and the voting is individual, of course, and there are different practices. In Estonia, what we did, we've used the quite popular standard that if 80% of the people agree, strongly agree to this proposal that is being collectively created, then this is the final recommendation. Everything else is not. So there's more, it's not a consensus, but it's definitely more consensus than, 51% voting pro it. And then the recommendations are given over to the commissioning body. These are usually public, either local government or the state government or regional government, if they exist. And more and more in recent years, the citizen assembly practice has gone to, well, there are two ways. The citizen assembly can be a binding one from the start or non-binding one. But more and more, the practice goes to the binding ones. And it doesn't mean that, say, Tallinn city government now has to know already like what to respond. No, they have to have the mechanism, like how do they respond? That's the thing, that's the binding part. So they have to declare like, okay, in 2 months after receiving their recommendations, we will come out publicly and kind of respond to them. And we will, just an example, in Tartu we did like that, that the Tartu city government said that, okay, this is the bunch of recommendations that we will take into consideration, and this will go directly to the budget, and so to implementation basically. This is the bunch of recommendations that needs more, I don't know, analysis or maybe budget or some other resources. So it needs more time. And this bunch of the recommendations, are already in the working process or we cannot do because of these and these reasons. So there has to be very precise response, basically. And if the response doesn't come, then the climate or citizen assembly, one of its aims is usually also to raise general trust, public trust towards institutions, toward officials, towards democracy also, and towards others, also other citizens, like living in the same unit, or be it the state or the town or city. But if the kind of response is lacking, or if it changes over the time, then the process can suffer a lot, and the trust as well. Maybe you have already now some questions, or is this too basic for you? I would then briefly talk about the Estonian cases and show some useful maybe resources.
I'd encourage anybody who has clarifying, and I have already many clarifying questions, but I don't want to take over. So if anybody has clarifying questions about the sort of more general process or anything else, please just put up your hand and we can take them in maybe already now. And if you're still thinking, we can do that later and come back to some of the points.
Maybe I show the resources. So there's this knockout.eu knowledge network on climate assemblies, specifically on climate assemblies, and this has European focus. And they are gathering a lot of resources and mapping the local and national ones. They are having constant learning course. This network is driven by one of my favorite professors, Graham Smith, from UK. So he's a political scientist, and he's been called also the godfather of climate assemblies, actually. So I'm honored to know him, and he's been to Estonia also, and he's also advising us, has been advising on the 2 previous ones, and now with Tallinn also. So anytime we have, how is this oversampling being done in this random sampling? Because we haven't done it before that in a detailed manner. And I'm like, can you direct me to some papers or some like guidelines? There are so many guidelines out there. So here also you see NOCA also funds, so it's a network of practitioners, and NOCA very much drives the kind of development, like R&D of the method. So there are a lot of, let's for example open this one, different members of the group. They basically then research the thing, not academically, of course not, but I don't know what's the right word. Just to show you an example, Eva Rovers, and then yeah, these are the either advocates or practitioners who usually also have professor's title. So anyway, this kind of guidelines plus policy papers, I would call them. So NOCA is one very vital network. Then there's the global one, is the OECD. They have very awful website, but it's called the Innovative Citizen Participation, New Democratic Institutions, and they are still mapping the practice of deliberative representative mini publics on different topics. And I just found out, and they have also the manuals, and like how does it differ from usual or representative democracy or even participatory democracy. And they have just updated the, I already downloaded it. Yeah, okay, yeah, and they have created the standards, that is not this paper, but the standards that the kind of international community, there are very strong practitioners in Canada, for example, and in Australia, and of course in Europe. All the practitioners basically co-created the good practice standards for deliberative mini publics. So most of the countries and most of the practitioners that organize the assemblies and want to create some impact with that, with them, they follow these practices, good principles. Anyway, and they just have up to 2021, they've updated the database. And this is just a report of the database, and they are actually continuously doing that. And they organize some events and some discussions, but this is more background help, so to say. We get a lot of proof from here, like, hey, see, this is all over the world, and on these and these topics, and you know, maybe it's a helpful resource for you as well.
If you could put later maybe a link for that in the chat, that would be really helpful. Somebody has asked for it. Well, I think it's that relating to that one.
Yeah, I will. There was a nicer way. I have to look for it. They had this kind of different guidelines. I have to look for the right website, but I will. All right. And then briefly about the Estonian ones so far. So we've actually we've had so far already 3 citizen assemblies. Just the first one was right after Iceland was trying to create their constitution with the citizen assembly. That was back in 2011 and 12, but they didn't end up with this with the constitution because the process was yeah, well, the commissioner didn't respond in a way. They still have the very old constitution. But then we got inspiration for that, and then in 2013, Estonia had nationwide citizen assembly on over-politicization, citizen engagement, electoral reform, and then things like that. Quite many topics in there. So we have that experience. But now, when I'm looking back at that, it was just one day of deliberation. And for example, OECD wouldn't count that as a citizen assembly anymore, because the method is like, or the format is continuously developing, like even too fast maybe. There's been, you know, foresight being added, and you know, the members of parliament are sometimes also with among the participants deliberately, or just one representative, and very in detail, in maybe in technical terms, it's developing fast. But then around climate, we've had 2 assemblies so far, and the third is in the progress and will take place in Tallinn in October and November. But since Tallinn city government is quite a complex customer we are as consultants for them, then the preparations take a lot of time. And this is also usually the case, that preparations take time, and this needs to be planned. But I'll briefly, I have some slides about the first climate assembly that was with youth only, and in the climate-wise, in the worst region in Estonia. This region is the oil shale mining region. We're still depending on oil shale. I know, you can't imagine that. But then we have the climate minister now in our new government. Oh, hallelujah. And he just allowed to open another oil shale mining, which is a shame. But all right, let's not go in there. So this, it was a regional one. It was only with youth. So this is also possible to kind of limit the audience, but then still the youth between 16 and 29 years, still they were randomly sampled. So it was still representative, but just in terms for the youth, yeah. And it was around just transition, and well, we basically initiated with two organizations, like in a way bottom up, but the Ministry of Finance, who is coordinating the just transition of that region, was very, very happy that we did it, because they also had identified that the youth is totally out from the process, and you know, the industry, the what's it called? How am I doing? The trade union, and other participants like local municipalities, they were all discussing and making the plans. But the youth, because that region is mainly Russian speaking also, so they don't have that good maybe culture and history of civic common actions. So we helped with the assembly in that sense, and we achieved much more than we hoped. Although it was just over 3 days during 2 weekends, it was virtual. Here's some pictures. And here, and there was like Jeep Corona also, so like all the obstacles you can imagine, you know, we had. This is the minister, he's getting the recommendations from youth. The president met with them, but we achieved in that sense more, that the young people are now organized. They formed an NGO, and they continue working for raising climate awareness, and also just doing some collaboration projects, you know, creating that culture in that region. And they are a representative in the very formal, what's it called, steering committee of the Just Transition at the Ministry of Finance. And they're doing fine there, actually. They are representing the youth, so their voice is there, and they're taking it very seriously. And that kind of voluntary job is for many years to come. I think for 8 years, this committee is set there, or maybe a bit less. Yeah. So this was the first climate assembly in Estonia. And then the second one, just around with Tartu, the second biggest town, because we don't have cities in Estonia. Tartu has a population of 100,000 people only. It was just exactly a year ago, and on urban space, how to make it safer and more attractive. So basically around mobility, but not only, also urban space, and how to be in the space and all that. Quite a safe topic. But then again, Tartu is the only municipality in Estonia that has very ambitious climate goals, and Tartu is also among the 100 European climate neutral cities. So they won that mission also. So in that sense, it was fine, because they do a lot of things already, and they wanted to test out. Municipalities usually call it a new and innovative engagement method, and we, as the former experts, we say like, okay, let's start with that. But actually, this is a decision-making tool and format, and it can be much more if you integrate it, institutionalize it. And this is the goal with Tartu also. We're still working on it, but they would organize the second one and establish it in the system. But I think I won't go into details like what happened here. The process is we're waiting from Tartu also. It's 1 year after now. These are the pictures from when the local government was responding publicly and convened the mini public of 45 people. This mini Tartu again, but this is the mayor. But after in 1 month you can't show the results. So we're now looking from Tartu like, okay, please summarize the results. What did the climate assembly actually affect? What did it accelerate in the kind of local government system, in climate actions? Because they also have the energy and climate plan that has very precise actions. What did it how did it encourage even the politicians? Like what are they willing to do now more? And what kind of topics got a public mandate. So they will publish during this kind of summary, and then we can close this process also for ourselves, and then continue with the next one. But I think that's it from my side now, and let's discuss. Just chat. I think I stopped sharing.
Yeah, we have already a couple of thoughts in the chat, and maybe Alexandra, you can start. I have too many questions, but let's start with your question. And anybody else who feels like they want to ask, either type it in the chat or put up your hand so that we already have another person. But let's start with Alexandra.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much, Ayat. I just put a comment there in terms of the process of information giving in deliberative processes. You mentioned, that it needs to be objective, and that there's maybe some topics that might be eliminated for discussion. For example, the use of oil and stuff like that. I wonder, do you use a particular protocol when you make that decision in terms of who is going to give objective, information giving? How is that agenda set in terms of what are the right topics when you're, for example, talking about biodiversity or, urban environments?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Teele.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Usually my colleague takes care of that part. The knowledge, we call it the knowledge transfer. But there are, of course, international standards for that also, and there are different practices. One of them is to establish expert committee. So acknowledged experts, that don't have to be too many, maybe 3 or 4 researchers, and they have the task to choose the researchers and to work with them so that they would, deliver this 12-minute presentation in a balanced way, in simple language and all that. But still, it has to be kind of transparent also how the choices are being made and all that. Then there's we haven't used this expert panel because we're always in time pressure in that sense, and we don't want to make it, if we organize it for the first time with a local authority, we don't want to make it too complex for them in that sense. And in Estonia, we don't have, so far, we haven't had problems with the experts that we had chosen, but it's not just us as the organizers and as the consultants, but the process also is in a way like snowballing. So we map the ones who know about these topics. And for example, with Tartu case, sustainable mobility, 3 experts in Estonia. And everybody knows, or maybe 4 now. So there's not such a big pool to choose from anyway. But then we give the experts themselves can also suggest new ones, So it's a process of, it's not totally co-creation, but it's, everybody has the right to propose. And then a third option actually is also that during the assembly, so some of the knowledge experts are chosen already, but then the participants have the right and the power to invite more. Like, okay, we didn't hear about this topic actually. Like, where was public transport in this sustainable mobility? Like, it was totally missing. Like, and who in Tartu we did that. We mapped the missing topics, and then we quickly invited. But then some of the experts were from the local government actually, because we don't have public transport researchers. You know, you have to make compromises during the design and process. Also, there's the time pressure, but it always has to be very kind of transparent and public, and the main criteria for the organizer is also has to be totally objective, and this is sometimes hard to do. But then you know, we shoot our own leg if we're not.
Yeah, that's something which is, of course, you don't necessarily realize this maybe in larger countries like in Ireland or in the UK, that this is one of the issues. If you want to keep it in Estonian, you might not get as many specialists in the topics as you need. So you have to go by them, which of course can create problems and can create situations where you do have people whose views maybe are slightly in conflict with what you want to achieve. And that was actually my question. So I just quickly slip it in because it's directly related. So how do you deal with these kinds of potential conflicts, both between the experts as well as you know, because you're using random sampling, the potential of having, for instance, climate deniers turning up? How do you deal with these kinds of conflicts?
Oh, climate deniers they have to be there. That's the thing. That's sorry, I didn't talk about that thing you're interested actually. Because it has to, random sample, and this is a trend in climate assemblies, or now I think it's a kind of standard already. Not only, you know, the age and the maybe income and the educational level and your sex, but also your concern towards climate warming. Very concerned or not concerned at all. So both these lines have to be represented. Of course, it's always more difficult to get the deniers, but there are, you know, you do oversampling them, and then or there are techniques also, just call and convince, like, this is a very important process, you have to come. So that was one thing. But then conflicting views between experts. I have too little experience actually on that, but there's also this kind of preparation process with the experts. One is the plain language thing, where the other one is like, no difficult graphs. You have to, you know, explain it to your, I don't know, daughter or relative. Basically, that's the suggestion, because ordinary citizens are there. But then again, it's the ordinary citizens. The kind of assumption is not that they have to turn into experts themselves. No, they're there as citizens with their lived experience, with their education, with their, I don't know, social networks. But the motto of this citizen assembly is that small group of informed and deliberative people make better and bolder decisions than a large group that is uninformed. And this large group can be politicians as well. But then I would say the conflicting views, they emerge usually between the stakeholders. So in this just transition youth climate assembly in the Ida-Viru northeast of Estonia, that's a very conflicting topic. It's actually a very poisonous topic, because that in the oil shale region, right, young people have been left out. There's a state company, energy company, that is actually using the oil shale to create energy, to burn it, to get energy. So the state company, together with the trade unions, was very the strongest stakeholders there, or interest groups. Sorry, interest group is a better word. And then the environmental organizations next to them, plus local people. Basically, we didn't hire actors, but we couldn't find a representative of local community. So we asked, okay, culture people, they in a way that they don't represent, but they have the local view. So it was really difficult to combine the set of interest groups there. Of course, they have conflicting interests, because the energy company, the state-owned energy company, was like, yeah, but we offer scholarships, for you, and we do so much great work. And then the environmental organization comes with the myths, if we continue burning the oil shale, how does it affect our CO2 emissions and all that? And it actually, people are smart, actually. Ordinary people are also smart. If they have the time, the space, the safe space, the information, and good facilitation also, time for pauses, snacks, for toilets, all that essential parts, they realize the conflicts themselves. And there are so many questions, there's so much time and space for questions always also, that this come out through the questions. Yeah. More hands, sorry.
Sure, yeah, David.
Hi, thanks very much, Teele. That was really interesting. It's great to hear from someone with actual practical experience of doing these things. I'm asking you a question because thinking about an issue that might come up later on in a project that I'm working on, but I was wondering, have you had any experience or heard of anything about issues that have come up between, what's come to constitute the shape of a legitimate assembly, like, the representative deliberative mini public, and how that translates cross-culturally? So like, I'm thinking of there's Arctic communities who have like a very long tradition of doing everything by, I suppose, what you could call an assembly, which is the town hall model where everybody comes together, deliberates, and makes a decision. And then, so for them, the representative sampling is actually a form of exclusion. They're not welcome to come to make decisions the same way that they've always done, which is kind of the open door policy, instead of it being what we would in kind of Western Europe experience as a way of being included in political decision making.
Okay, very good question. Yeah, so you meant indigenous people, right?
Yeah.
Good. Right. This is my son. I'm not the right person to answer that, but I can just share some of my thoughts because this is researchers' field already. But I would, the citizen assemblies, yeah, they in a way are constructed on the understanding that democracy is for everyone, everybody's equal, and that's the building block there. So the random sampling creates the opportunity. Everybody has the equal chance to be chosen to the random sample. That's the thing. And I understand what you meant, excluding or including. But there are different ways also how indigenous people and actually also the future generations are being, and non-humans are being, that's a different case now, are heard as one of the interest groups. But there are already innovations. I'm not aware of them yet, but I know the people that work with that, so I'm like excited to discover these ways. But what are your thoughts actually? Or
I don't have a solution, I suppose. I'm just thinking. So in what we are doing in my project is we'll have to come up with good practice guidelines on how to establish ocean assemblies across Europe. But I'm just very aware of what we call an assembly, and it's the same in Ireland. We have a very specific definition, and it is exactly that, deliberative mini public. But I'm just very aware that that is not what constitutes an assembly. In some countries that have a much longer tradition of doing deliberative democracy than we have just kind of come around to. So superimposing what is now an assembly on those communities could be very difficult, and I'm just kind of thinking about how to manage that in the future.
But just one maybe relief is that the citizen assemblies, they don't have to be the biggest process. They can be integrated in a longer process also. They can be used. It's a flexible format, so they can be used. After some process to validate or give a public mandate, they can be used like in the very beginning of a policy-making process where the very difficult trade-offs have to be made. This is what we're considering for the Estonian climate law. This is being promised, but it's not being drafted yet. So like where to situate the National Climate Assembly, actually, there are different options, and you can always use other formats and methods to engage, and then you also kind of structure them in the what is more important, what not, and what comes before, what comes after. So I think that's
a good point. Yeah, thank you.
I'm a process person. So yeah, it's my thing.
Thank you. Clodagh.
Hello, hi, Clodagh Harris here. I'm also in Ireland. Just, I suppose, thank you very much. That was really interesting. I had known there were some assemblies taking place in Estonia, so it was great to hear the details. And I suppose
you in Ireland are much further, like the biodiversity assembly recently and everything. Like, oh,
yeah. And I suppose I was actually involved in it and the children's one as well. But sorry, I had a couple of questions coming from my own experience actually of citizens' assemblies that I was really keen to hear about. I suppose firstly it's around, for those who aren't chosen randomly to be part of this, is there an opportunity in some shape or form for the public to be involved? And I'm thinking, I suppose this leads to two kind of sub-questions. And firstly, in terms of the agenda, is it similar to what we have here in Ireland in the sense that the agenda is set either by a local authority in the cases you've mentioned, or by the government in the Irish case, the Parliament, sorry, the Houses of the Oireachtas? So is there any kind of scope or space for the public to shape what is being discussed? And that's one thing. And then is there also scope in the process within the programme itself for the public to feed in their ideas? And I mean the public meaning, citizens or community groups or NGOs or even interest groups. Because I'm always very curious as to how the learning and the information and the expertise and the lived experience, how that is translated in and also out of these assemblies. So I suppose they're my questions. But thank you again. Oh.
Dana, you're muted. We missed all that you said. Start again.
All right. So I understood there were two questions. What were the three? Two. I take two first. About the how to engage the ones who weren't chosen. What kind of relationship they have, and then the scope or the topic or the remit, of the assembly, like who sets it and what. So I start with the remit. Now this NOCA, they have nice infographic also, but there's also a separate file, this long paper, how to set the remit, what kind of criteria are there. And this is what we just used 2 days ago with Tallinn, with the decision makers. We had an internal seminar to, usually the commissioning body kind of sets the broad topic, but it can't be just like how to solve climate crisis. Because that's this will be a waste of time and resources if the title is being framed like that. So it has to be very understandable for the citizens. It has to touch their everyday choices and lives, even though they make recommendations to the public authority. And it has to have, the resource efficiency, ownership, all that. So this is a nice overview of the elements. And there are ways. There can be also a way where the topic is being proposed, like Extinction Rebellion is doing. Also, have to have on climate change, like very broad, but then the process always still follows. Like, okay, let's make it more precise. And FIDE, he's another. Sorry, I didn't show FIDE. FIDE is another organization, and Federation for Innovating Democracy in Europe. I'll send the link to that also. And that director, he says that there needs to be a trade-off, actually. If there's not a trade-off in the remit, then it's too broad, or maybe it's too vague, and then the recommendations or the outcome is also maybe too many recommendations, too much, like covering everything, all the aspects of life. And this is a bad design, actually. This shouldn't happen. There are also ways, specifically in Poland, they practice that a lot, that if they get the consultants or the organizers, they get kind of invitation to organize an assembly. They consult, for example, with youth. And this doesn't have to be randomly sampled. And maybe some group of school kids or something. Okay, we have this topic. Say it's a very broad topic, climate change, and say it's a local one. So what comes to your mind first? You know, what kind of topics? Okay, biodiversity. I don't know, too much rain and stuff like that. And it's being consulted in that way, or input is being asked. But still, there has to be this kind of professional design after that to propose. And usually in Tallinn case also, Tallinn is very politicized context, and for example, the biggest environmental impact comes from car-oriented planning. Still, it's easiest to drive cars. Tallinn is overcrowded with cars, and still the planning practice continues, although we have different voices already in the city government. So that topic was banned by the mayor. So our trade-off was, all right, let's then, because our aim is to still give the municipality also lived experience with how does this method differ from all the rest, public participation, public hearings, public debates, consultations, or what they do usually, and some co-creation stuff that they do, or they just name it like that, but they actually don't do it. So we also had to make a trade-off in that sense that, okay, let's go with the biodiversity, but we already know that it will touch upon the mobility, or at least public space, the division of public space, the proportions dedicated to cars, to bike lanes, to pedestrians, and to greenery. It will come to that anyway. So we were like, all right, let's do that. That was about the remit. And then, okay, yeah, those who are not selected, they can be involved, but in the minimum package, they don't have to be involved. The answer is the process needs to be very transparent. And also all the knowledge that is being presented and created needs to be basically online very fast. That usually the expert speakers, their presentations are being recorded and they're up there later, with the exception that the question and answer bit, like the participants need to be protected. Their identities need to be protected, not in every case, but if it's a very conflicting topic during the process, the identities need to be protected. So, no faces are being recorded of the participants, only the experts presenting or the stakeholders presenting. And then usually the scripts or the summaries and all that after each meeting are being prepared very quickly, and also this kind of active communication. So in a way that people who are not there can feel that, I'm actually part of it in a way. And they also feel that they are part of it if they see, well, this usually happens afterwards, when the photos of the participants are being, spread around, that, there's a person, looking like me, or, he's my neighbor, I recognize. So you feel this, that I was represented in a way.
Thank you. I really like the way that you're sneaking in the themes that are actually important from behind the back of the power holders. Yunus.
Thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this event. Thank you so much. I have to contribute something about the methods of the democracy. I mean, I want to define it open democracy for all citizens, and I have some suggestions about it, because I had a project in Turkey 12 years ago. Its name's e-Parliament. It was a parliament of social media, and all citizens of Turkish people was intended to participate in the democracy and initiated to describe themselves about the policies which are issued in the Turkey and in my country. My suggestion is to use the social media to reach to citizens in the project, during the project in Estonia, for example. In that way, particularly as I understood that it is significantly for the expertise people. But my suggestion, my opinion is it should be open for all the citizens. For example, the youngsters can be a good target group for them because they represent from all of the social democratic backgrounds. They are also citizens. They have different cultural specialties. It is just my opinion. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Sorry, it was a bit hard to understand the
There was a little bit of a muffled moment, which I also missed. But would you like for Yunus to briefly summarize? Yunus, can I just suggest that if you're slightly away from the computer, it seems to be clearer. When you're coming closer, it becomes muffled. So I don't know. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, just briefly, maybe summarize what you wanted to say.
Okay, there is a method to reach out to people from the different citizens in the country, especially, for example, in that case, Estonia, social media, for example, Facebook groups, Twitter, or Facebook groups is a very good place to reach the people to follow the ideas about the climate resilience, about the climate change, for example. This is my remark.
Facebook groups, you said?
Yes, for reach the people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Project. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't comment that. Maybe I will just think that the sampling usually happens on the data of the population registry. And in Estonia, I don't know if Estonia is the only country in the world, but we can do it online. We can do it through emails. We have the data, who we want to, like which kind of people the sample has to consist, and then emails are being sent. But not only, like there needs to be more special effort, to reach out to different groups, basically for the sake of creating also the so that people here, before they get the invitation, they know that this kind of very important process is happening, and they can come and help the state or the local government to accelerate the necessary steps, or give, I don't know, encouragement to the politicians, whatever the case is. And then it's much more likely that they actually respond that, yeah, okay, I want to participate in that process.
Thank you. Alexandra, did you want to clarify anything that was just said, or can I sneak in another question, or did you just, is it following on what was just discussed?
It's actually a comment on Jonas and just on the sampling process, I suppose, which is a really interesting one. And Citizens Assembly have a very specific way of doing it. There are of course problems with it, and you spoke about it in terms of
Alexandra, we're losing you. Maybe you can turn off your camera. Alexandra often has that problem.
Yes,
sorry.
Apologies. Yeah, I was thinking about the sampling process that can be problematic sometimes. And you mentioned that you're, perhaps oversampling in relation to public opinion, or opinion in relation to climate, for example, which is really interesting. The Citizens Assembly is very specific the way it samples, but I wonder, is it always the right way? And I suppose with Claude, I would have talked about this, or we discussed this before. The fact that people get an invitation to participate doesn't mean that they will accept the invitation, and that's the problem, where sometimes you actually have to actually target invitations to specific people and really work on that, to get people to participate. And that's maybe where social media and other areas might be interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. And there are, like I've said many times before, there are many ways to do the random sampling also. Usually there are like, it's 2-stage. So a bunch of, in Tallinn case, we will send out 30,000 invitations. And then the people who get, and this is already a random sample based on the existing data from the population registry. So it has to be limited, only Tallinners, for example, and the different ages, address basically, or the like district, and some more. And then they will actually register their interest. And after that, when we get that final bunch of couple of hundreds, usually it's the final, like the ideal sample is being made out of those. And then if some people, some represented, some kind of criteria is missing and sounds bad, then replacement needs to be, or these people need to be found somewhere. And this also needs to be according to the standards, not just like, hey mom, can you come in?
Yeah. So I was going to drag you back to the agonistic dimension, and there is a little bit of a background is needed on Estonia. We have not been very successful in having effective protests or any kind of agonistic processes. It's almost as if in the late 80s and early 90s, when we were having these kind of freedom fights or the singing revolution, we used up all the protest energy, and it just hasn't really happened since. We haven't had, despite lots of different problems, we haven't had effective protests and processes which would sort of recognize, even publicly or in the media, that the protests are somehow also an important contribution into democratic processes. So I was just wondering whether, in the case like that, or more generally, whether this kind of deliberative process that you are representing, but you mentioned also that you do have experience in being on the streets, whether this kind of country and context might be where this kind of agonistic process, let's just give up, let's throw up our hands and say, well, in Extinction Rebellion case we have 10 people, maybe in Fridays for Future case we have originally at some point we've had maybe a couple of hundred kids on the streets for a very, very limited period, and now we just have 6. Often on social media rather than on the streets. So should we just sort of say that, well, actually, in a country like that, deliberative process is the one to go to, and agonistic process maybe can't really contribute? And maybe you can sort of link this with your own experience on the streets, if this is something that can be linked.
You were talking about Estonia now, right?
I am, but if you're able to sort of expand it to other countries, then great.
Yeah, I've also been to courts against city governments. Demonstrations, courts, citizens, everything. You name it.
You've done it.
Yeah, as a community activist with the community. I think if we zoom into Estonia or make the conclusion to other young democracies, I think that's the issue of young democracies. We don't have the practice yet. We don't have the understanding what kind of freedom do we have, and what does it mean also to take care of it. This is just the parliament process that I came from. Democracy's prerequisite is that you have to renew it. And somebody from Sitra, actually the Finnish innovation agency, defined it. I don't know who is the original author of that. Is democracy needs to be revised, reused, and the third one was reinvented all the time. Reuse in that sense that what works, needs to be accelerated and empowered. So I love that framing a lot. And in Estonia, which is such a young democracy, and even the street demonstrations are a rare sight. Although a couple of years ago, when we had to raise research funding, and then for climate actions, against climate actions, against the same-sex marriages, I was thinking, like, as an urbanist, like, wow, this is the ideal use of public space. Because that's what it's meant, different views come together, you show your support or anti-support, whatever, you know, we could have created the demonstrations calendar. Like, oh, where do I go today? But then from my experience, yeah, demonstration is always the kind of final cry. If you don't have the means, you don't have the leverage to the decision makers, or this is true to Estonia also, that the engagement practices, or the citizen engagement and also stakeholder engagement, civic society engagement is it's not that good. And I just made a report for the government office on that, around open government principles, like how are they being followed. There are so many exceptions, and still politicians come in with their like, hey, this needs to be just, this has to go through in 3 days, and you know, these kind of bad political manners. let's frame them like that. So this all affects, and then the citizens get more and more disappointed. Also, like, hey, nothing, you know, changes. We can't affect anything. Yeah. Okay. So your question was, shall we drop all the previous ones and get to deliberations? It would be nice, but it's not the only one. Also, it's not the panacea, and not the only method. And I think everything is needed. Like demonstrations are also very vital, because it can actually draw more attention, or you know, people get to, you know, public spaces for different ideas and people. So this has to stay. We can't clean public space in that sense. But I didn't answer your question that well.
No, but I mean, I guess it's so true that it's the public space where it's completely self-selective. You know, who turn up because they are really passionate about something, and how they express this. And at least in the UK, these protests have been the avenue of bringing in and emphasizing the importance of these deliberative processes, such as climate assemblies, Extinction Rebellion's. One of the 3 main demands is to change the democratic process, to change, to go beyond the existing politics, and to change the way that we are deciding. And of course, it sort of also feeds back information, which I don't unfortunately have the data on this. But at some point after some of the XR protests, they were also running surveys and said that, you know, if you are taking these kinds of avenues to learning about what people want, you may realize that people want far more change than the politicians claim that they do. So politicians' interest seems to be to say, you know, people don't want this. I mean, we would, of course, change everything, but we can't. We're tied down by these democratic rules and publics. And you say, well, maybe there's something wrong about these democratic rules that we have. And if we use a different way of using democracy for gathering information, then we might learn that people are far more ready to change in order to save the future.
The French example, also the Yellow Vest demonstrations, mainly, correct me if I'm wrong, mainly from the lower income, by the lower income people protesting against rise of petrol prices. And that actually led to the French Climate Assembly, which Macron was curating. Yeah, so. But
interesting.
That Climate Assembly, actually very ambitious recommendations. 150 or around 150 recommendations came out, including, you know, to criminalize ecocide, but this needs to go into the constitution, so it hasn't been done. But okay, one thing is always like, what the climate assemblies or citizen assemblies, like how many proposals are being implemented. The other impact that you can measure is like what kind of shift did it create in public discussions or in the policymakers' heads, also in that sense. And Graham Smith from NOCA, he says that climate issues are, you know, they can't be disregarded anymore in France, thanks to the Climate Assembly. But that's not the only benefit, of course. But you know, so I don't know. Well, the French like to go to the streets, yeah, very often, which sometimes I envy. but maybe there's more awareness among the citizens also around the issues now. Like,
yeah, French are the model that we have. Interestingly, though, I think the politicians in France are not quite as healthily afraid of the French public anymore as they used to be a couple of 100 years ago. So something has changed. But I'd encourage people to maybe quickly, if anybody has any further questions, when I realize that in terms of length of discussion, we already have had 40 minutes, which is our norm. I still have one small question that I would like to ask, but I would like other people to have a chance before that, because I tend to otherwise I have too much of the floor.
Sorry, I just realized I'm late to another.
Oops. Okay. All right. What's
1 hour? Sorry,
Sorry. Yes. So your meeting has already started. The other meeting. Okay. In that case, we'll let you go. We already have used a lot of your time, and I will ask my question separately from you in person. Maybe. Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone to come. We let Teele to run off to the next meeting, and I was also going to draw your attention to all sorts of information that's in the chat on both the webinar and also the fact that Clodagh, who asked the question before, is one of the presenters at the seminar and has also added a number of links to the chat. I'll try to save the chat so that we can add this whenever the information and the recordings are going to finally make their way to Shift website. But if you want to link already now, then you can get to it a bit quicker, because I don't really know when there will be an update of the website. And thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you all in June in a June meeting. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Bye.